Rare Pod, where we dive into the journeys of bold, creative, and ambitious individuals who are redefining success like yourself. We're your hosts. I'm Rania. And I'm Reem. And in each episode, we bring you insightful conversations with entrepreneurs, innovators, change makers who have taken risks, challenged the norm, and turned their ideas into impact. Today, we're excited to talk to Miss Kiran Ranmal, where we will be discussing the art of resilience, embracing change, advocating for yourself, while also thriving in uncertainty. How are you doing, Miss Ranmal?
I am doing good. I'm happy to get to see your guys' face. How are y'all doing?
We're so happy to see you as well.
Oh,
To give a background, Miss Runwell was our debate coach for the past 3 years, and it's been such an honor to be able to learn from her and see how she's also grown and bloomed herself. So, do you mind starting off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I was an educator for 5 years. I'm very passionate about, I would say, just living an authentic life. I'm passionate about giving back, and I have had a very interesting journey that has led me to where I am today, but I'm very grateful to be where I am today and all the experiences that have led me here. Um, and yeah, I would say that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Yeah, having you as a teacher, I remember in freshman year, you told me the same thing, how important authenticity is, and also to just advocate for yourself. So that's really helped me grow as well. And throughout it all, it's just inspiring to see how you've been able to pivot because I know a lot of times in the moment, it can be difficult seeming like, is this the right option? But then ahead of time, you'll see like, oh, like it all makes sense. Like it made sense that I had to go through that. And those setbacks really can be those key steps to success. So we've seen how you also published your own book. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what inspired you to write Brighter Days and how those themes connect to the resilience that you have shown with your journey, adapting to change and advocating for oneself?
Yeah, for sure. And I love the way that you phrase that like everything that all our setbacks like lead us to where we are today, because that's a big theme and a big thing that I had like learned in my life in general. I would say I wrote a lot of brighter days when I was younger. And a few things were sprinkled in as I was like a younger, older adult. But I think more than what inspired me to write it, because I always wrote as an outlet, like my poems literally were like my journal. When I was younger, it was hard for me to be vulnerable and like share my difficulties. So I think more than what inspired me to write it, for me, it was what inspired me to put it together, make a book, and publish it. And that I think would be being just like, I think I said this earlier in the about me, but living this vulnerable and courageous life, I think has always been something important to me because it, like when we're vulnerable, we're also like giving hope, right? Like when I share what I've been through, even though it feels like really hard sometimes, I know that there might be someone else who's struggling with the same thing and they're like, okay, this is normal. It reminds me that it's like we have these shared experiences that just make us human, both good moments and heartbreaking moments. So that's what really inspired me to publish Brighter Days. And I think the chapters of it would resemble just like this growth that I had throughout the process that I was writing it. So it kind of started in like a very like hopeless, dark place. And then it makes its way to like oh, I think I see some light at the end of the tunnel. And that was a lot of my younger up until like my younger 20s, like I would say teens to younger 20s. That was a big theme for me.
That's so true. It's so important that uh, it's really hard to be vulnerable, and it doesn't even seem like that, but being able to go through that process, and even if you're able to just make that impact on one person, that's what matters. What advice would you give to someone who struggles to speak up for themselves, touching on that aspect of being vulnerable?
Yeah, I would say Give yourself grace and compassion because speaking up feels really scary, and that's okay. And some of us like struggle with that more than others, right? For some of us, it comes naturally, and for some of us, we do it while we're scared. And I think that's what it's really about. And for some of us, it like literally feels impossible. When I was like I would say middle school to high school, I struggled with major social anxiety. And social anxiety, like for those who have it and struggle with it, it's a very like physical sensation. Like it makes no logical sense. It's like I would want to say something, but it's like my voice would not come out. So I would also say give yourself time because being where I am today, I would never think that like that would no longer be a struggle in my life. Like if you told me when I was 15, you will not be socially anxious one day, I would be like, get out of here. Like this is who I am, you know? So give yourself compassion and grace that it's okay. We all have our struggles. And two, give yourself time. When you're intentionally working on something, you have to give yourself time to reap those rewards.
That definitely makes sense, being able to, take the time and, on also, I feel like you can always be a little bit more harder on yourself. So it's important to, be mindful of that and cautious. And to touching on that, have you ever had to push for your own ideas or opportunities in a challenging situation? And using that same kind of background, how did you approach it or like reapproach that from a different style?
Yeah, I would, well, to kind of touch on what you said, we are our worst enemies, which is why like it's so important to give ourselves grace. And yes, I would say a situation, and I think I can relate it back to both education and my very short-lived business venture. But speaking up about something, they were both different situations, but they came down to the same thing. And I would say I'm very passionate about not building a foundation based around fear. And that's something that I preached in the education world. And that's something I also preached at Blaze Pizza. When we're working with people, I don't think we need to be intimidating or authoritative to gain respect. And that was a hard thing to speak up for because it's not in leadership, it's not a quick fix, right? Like when you go this route of like, let's take a more human approach, let's build trust and let's get to know people. Those things take longer to see results from. So it was difficult to speak up for that. And I think what makes that easier is one, I'm just a little stubborn in that belief. So nothing, thankfully, is going to change that. But two, also, I think it's what debate kind of also taught me simultaneously while I was teaching y'all is figuring out how to like put a message together that's going to effectively translate to the audience you're presenting to. Whether they fully agree or not, that's okay, as long as you kind of start getting them on board.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that building connections is so important, and that those maybe old traditional ways of fear isn't something that necessarily, it may work, but it's not necessarily something that you always have to follow. And how important it is to, speak your voice. You're able to continue pushing and persevering, and then you're able to succeed. So, what does it mean to you? Being authentic in business and leadership, even when hearing no. I think a lot of times I'll reach out or try something new, but I'm faced with no, and that's something a lot of people struggle with. So, how do you overcome that?
I think one, and I think like successful people always say this, but so sorry, y'all. But you're gonna get so many no's before you get a yes. And whatever helps you keep faith, but it's like what's not meant for you. A big thing I believe in is what's not meant for you will not make its way to you, and it is what it is. So kind of taking those no's as one, take it as practice because you clearly got to get something out of it. Um, and two, know that the thing that does end up coming and becoming a yes is going to be the one that was meant for you. Also, I think it's important to stay aligned with your like values and not sacrifice those values to get that yes. So, like going to that authenticity part, I would say staying authentic to yourself needs to be a higher value than getting a yes.
Yeah, and I think that you're so right that it takes those no's to get to that yes and not giving up. I've heard this saying that life is like an arrow, so it's going to be pulled back, but that's what's going to launch you forward to your success. And I think that's something that we all kind of need to have in the back of our minds and remember to keep on persevering. And speaking on that, you mentioned how you should continue to persevere and not take that no, but also not conform. Are there any habits or mindsets that have helped you build resilience in the face of setback, or helped you not just conform to what everyone else is doing?
Yeah. Um, I think like those habits and mindsets that we form are such an important foundation to help us stay in that lane. And I think the ones that very much help me are journaling is a big thing that I have done for a really long time. I think journaling allows us to be introspective to what's going on around us and what's going on within us. And that always helps me kind of look at things objectively when I need to. And that also makes sure that I kind of hold myself, I have myself in check where I'm like, okay, I'm able to figure out, am I doing this for me? Am I, like that idea of like conforming or not? Because you really get to know yourself when you're journaling with yourself. I would also say, just like this foundation of faith. I've always said that I'm a very spiritual person, and that's because, sometimes like maybe religious people wouldn't consider me religious, but like faith is very important to me, and it's been a really strong foundation throughout my whole life. I wouldn't be where I am without that. And so this faith is really for me this like guiding compass that keeps me aligned in who I am. And naturally, we're human. There's moments, and there have been in my past. I think I'm continuously learning how to let it go, but like there's going to be moments we're going to want to conform because it's easier to conform. But when you have these habits and mindsets, so for me, journaling and faith, they kind of keep you grounded. And that's what it does for me.
Yes, that's so true. I also recently started journaling, and I think that it's such a great practice. And really being able to remember to just have that faith and be patient because it will all work out. That's something that I think we've both forgotten and sometimes seem to get stressed out about, especially in high school and going through college applications. A lot of teenagers are stressing what's going to happen for the rest of their lives. And how it's just such a big turning point and pivot in your life. What advice would you give to young people facing those major transitions, like entering colleges, changing careers, or even starting a business?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I say this all the time, but I would say you have to start with grace and compassion. You have to allow yourself to feel something to let it go, and starting anything new is scary. So validate and acknowledge that. Don't sit in it too long. Don't let it consume you, but you have to like acknowledge the feeling that this feels really scary, and that's okay. And then I would say reframe your perspective and your mindset because our perspective and our mindset literally shapes the experiences around us. So, and I showed this TED Talk. I would always talk about this TED Talk in class. I don't know if I showed it in our class, but it's a TED Talk about stress. And it kind of reframed like the perspective of stress rather than thinking that we're like really stressed, like think of it as like you're excited and your body's like getting you ready for something. So it's the same thing with like new experiences, right? Like it could be exciting. It could be a new opportunity. It could be a whole new journey that you didn't expect. So allow yourself to feel the scaries and then reframe that mindset of like, maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be.
I completely agree. I actually recently rewatched that TED Talk because I remember when we watched it in class and we were both preparing for a college interview and we were both really stressed and then I was like, oh, like I remember this podcast TED Talk and it was actually really helpful to see how just reframing your mindset can be so helpful. And I think that also a big part in debate when we also talked with you and learned from your experience was a big thing of, not shifting to other people's ideologies, just doing whatever they think's best and following that. And when there's so many different voices, powerful voices as well in the world who are saying other things, but you're going the other way, it can definitely be scary. And I'm really thankful to have you as a role model because I've always known, like, kind of like you said, to have that belief and faith to, my own moral values, which has always like guided me to do the right thing and what I actually advocate for.
And I have to say, like you guys, and I truly mean it, but it's like when I was y'all's age, I was not who I am today, right? Like being able to like do this, but like you guys are doing all these things at such a young age. Like I've seen y'all stand up for what you believe in, even when it's like an unpopular opinion. And I've seen y'all stay in this like ethical, moral compass. And I'm so excited to see everything you guys are going to do. But I hope you know how amazing you guys are doing right now at such a young age. So it's like, just imagine where y'all are going to go, which is really cool.
Thank you so much. We're so really grateful for your guidance. That is really what played a role in that and will have really, it just changed our life. How have you been able, like, how do you define success for yourself? I know sometimes people measure it in different ways. For some people, it may be their jobs, or other people, it just might be the impact they made. What does that mean to you?
Success. So there's I feel like I'm changing this answer all the time because I feel like it's so like broad, right? Like what does success mean? And I think as we grow, it'll keep kind of like evolving. But I narrowed it down to three things for you guys. So one I would say is progress. I think any sort of progress is successful. And progress doesn't need to be perfection, and it doesn't matter about pace as long as we're moving forward at some capacity as individuals and as a society. I think that's successful. And then second would be, I think, striving to live authentically. And for me, authenticity means just like I equate authenticity to being ethical. So making ethical decisions and living your life aligned with your values, I think would be successful. And then the third one would be to just continue learning, be a forever learning learner, as lame and cringy as that sounds, but both mentally and spiritually, as long as we are reminding ourselves that there's never enough to learn, like we can keep going, I think that is also successful.
I think that's so important to have those definitions that are true to what you believe in and what really matters to you. And when trying to balance all these different things, your job, learning new things, making time for yourself, how are you able to find balance?
That's a great question. I think that's something I can answer it in like two ways. One, I would say I feel like I'm really truly learning balance in my life like now. And I didn't even realize that until I had the opportunity to do it to the extent I'm doing it in my life today. Um, when I was in education, everyone knew I was so very passionate about it, and it was my number one thing in my life. And unintentionally, I neglected other parts of my life without realizing. Um, I will say, because I have like certain foundations in place, like practicing mindfulness, physical activity, eventually like eating well became one of those foundations. Those things I was able to like keep up, but I was never consistent with those things. And now being in a role that gives me a lot more room and time to practice balance makes balancing those things a lot easier. So I would say, and I don't know if this is like the best answer, but I think when we are given the time to practice balance, it's a lot easier to practice balance. But also in that other aspect of, when you are like super busy with like 10 million things and aspects going on, which we're going to have those moments in life, I would say setting those foundations. Like, what's important to you? I knew that even if I wouldn't consistently do it, faith and mindfulness is important to me. So maybe if I'm not meditating or making time for prayer every day, I'm doing it at least 3 or 4 times a week. If I'm not working out every day, I know I have to do it 4 times a week. There's no sacrificing there. So it's like really figuring out what are some things I am not going to sacrifice, and how are those things going to help me kind of set everything else in place? I hope that answers that.
That definitely makes sense. And I think you're so right with, being able to prioritize those foundational goals of yours and also kind of building it from the start. But sometimes you do have to make those changes and those pivots. And I think that making leaps or like jumps to something new or pivoting to actually like care for yourself can be challenging. To go back on that, do you have any regrets?
Not at all. I am such a big believer that everything like that happens in our life leads us to where we're meant to be. I wouldn't be where I am today without my past experiences. And also starting like my path from high school was I'm going to be a teacher. And then when I became a teacher, it was let me try administration. And all those experiences literally made me who I am today. This person who cares so much about the world, this person who is socially and emotionally aware. It's only because of those experiences. So no, I don't regret anything that has led me to where I am today.
I think that's a great answer. It's so important for our experiences to shape who we are. Whether it be, those negative moments or even those positive ones, they've all changed us into who we are today. And I think another note on that is that our goals are always changing. It feels like we're always constantly chasing something new. So it's always going to be like, who you're going to be like in 10 years versus now, like how it keeps on continuously chasing as you continue on this journey, what is the best advice that you have heard, or the worst piece of advice?
Oh man. Worst piece of advice is a funny one. Let me tell you best one. If I can think of worst one, I'm gonna say it. Best piece of advice is, in general, I think is this too shall pass, which I know is like said all the time, but truly, right? This too shall pass. I think I take that both in like good, everything in life is temporary, both good and bad. And I think when I was younger, the good things being temporary really scared me. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, I find like this beauty in it where it's like it forces us, knowing that nothing is going to last forever, forces us to be present in those sweet, yummy feeling moments. And then it also grounds us knowing that like when we're in this like painful state in life, it's not going to last forever. Like as much as in that moment we're so consumed in it, it's going to pass. So a big thing I always remind myself in any moment is this too shall pass. I definitely remind myself more in sad moments than happy moments, but.
Yeah, that's so true. To just remember that this will pass, and that's something that's really gonna stick with me. I think that a lot of times we live in fear and we're scared of the outcomes of our decisions. But something to learn is that your comfort zone is what's really gonna kill you, and how important it is to take a step outside of that and try new things because even if you fail, you can try again and do something new. And just overall, it's been so inspiring and great talking to you, like it always is. And we really appreciate all of this advice and learning how to be resilient and staying true to yourself.
Oh, of course. I'm honored to have gotten to speak to you guys.